Hello, witches. This is Casey Zabala, Modern Witches podcast host and creatrix of the Modern Witches community. I am popping in to share that this is our 100th podcast episode, and I'm just shocked and surprised that we have been doing this for nearly 2 years, maybe a little bit more. The journey of creating this podcast was an experiment. I started interviewing my favorite witches and collaborators as a way to research for an anthology project. And this past year, in October of 2024, our anthology came into being. A confluence of witches celebrating our lunar roots, decolonizing the craft, and re-enchanting our world came to be, with contributions from so many, in fact, 22 incredible witches who have been collaborators and inspirations for the modern witches community. These contributions range from chronic illness, ecology, working with spirit guides, working with other religious systems, working with the moon. The anthology is so rich and diverse, and if you haven't had a chance to pick it up, please do so. It is also available via audiobook. But here we are celebrating our 100th episode of the Modern Witches podcast, and this is a project that started as an experiment and started as a way to cultivate something physical, the anthology. And for those of you who have been following Modern Witches for some time, you know that we operate between the worlds and in a very much organic way. We started in 2018 by hosting a magical symposium for radical witches, and it's taken off from there. We have hosted in-person gatherings, Wheel of the Year celebrations, digital conferences, which drew thousands of witches to participate. And I feel that modern witches, as all of us truly are in some kind of transformative incubation state. The world is rapidly changing. The ways we have connected historically and recently are shifting dramatically. And we're in a pivot moment of really finding the right way for us to sustainably and organically connect and foster community. The podcast has been a fabulous way for us to do so. Over the years, we've expanded from interviews with incredible practitioners and magical folks to offering astrological insights with my co-host Karima and also Mariana. And our work is ever evolving and expanding as we are as individuals. If you have any feedback for us about our podcast, any ideas, anyone you'd love to see us engage with or collaborate with, please feel free to send us your ideas. You can reach us at info@witchesconfluence.org. And a reminder that Modern Witches has flown away from Instagram. We are no longer using Instagram as a way to share content, although we like to jump on there and just make announcements about what we're up to every now and again. The best way to stay connected with us is to subscribe to our newsletter. We share juicy lunar downloads, and we also share event updates there. And we're getting more creative as the days go by. So definitely jump on our newsletter list and stay connected with this community. You never know what's going to come to be. Many blessings to you, and please enjoy this incredibly juicy astrological episode with a special guest.
Welcome, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Modern Witches podcast. I'm Karima, And today I am joined with two beautiful, beautiful astrologers. I'm very excited about this episode with Antigone and Mariana. You already know Mariana. Hi, Mariana.
Hi, friends. Hi, Karima. Hi, Antigone.
Hey. And Antigone, that I'm going to let her introduce herself. You already know her through an interview that Casey did with her. I'm going to put the link in the description. But I'm going to let her introduce herself a little bit. Hi, Antigone.
Hi, Karima. Hi, Mariana. So thanks for having me. I am Antigone. I am originally from Greece. I have been a practitioner of magic and the rest, the unseen, for a very long time. And I was also part of the Conjuring Council of the Modern Witches Confluence, um, a few years ago, and I have my own practice helping people define and empower themselves through their relationship with spirit.
Nice. That is a very short summary. You're doing so much. So I'm going to put all your information down below and let people kind of discover your magic and what you do in the world. But I'm so happy to have you back because I worked with you back in 2020 on Modern Witches Conference, and it was a time that it was very intense where we were working on
Yep.
Zoom and we were bombarded by news of the COVID spreading and having all this in like it was crazy. It was a crazy time. So having it to having you to go through it and working with you on the modern witches were very a good time because you bring so much joy and optimistic and it was very nice to have you around. And then we miss you. Of course we do miss you.
Yeah, I do too, but we went through the hardest part together, I feel.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And so we are going to talk about a major event that is happening this year. Is one of the major events, and we couldn't not do a podcast about it, an episode about it, because we are in a time that I think is going to be deeply needed to have this transit happening, and is Saturn in Aries. Saturn in Aries is going to start in May 2025, sorry, until April 2028. And it's going to change the landscape of society and how we think and how we process, how we talk about boundaries, emotion, war. We're going to talk about all those themes, of course, but just to understand, we're going to talk a little bit first about how important it is. And we're going to go through what it's going to look like to have Saturn in Aries, how it was in the past, the last time that we had Saturn in Aries, but also how it was like the past 3 years when Saturn was in Pisces and how it impacted us personally, but how also it impacted us collectively. And of course, we will mention Neptune in that episode because those two planets are doing a huge shift. Neptune is already in Aries and they're going to communicate with each other. So we cannot talk about Saturn without talking about Neptune. And Saturn and Neptune are both planets that are like opposite. So it's going to be very interesting on how it's going to impact us in the world. And I'm excited to talk about it with you guys a lot. And right now we have so much going to happen. Like we have Jupiter going to Cancer, whereas Uranus is heading towards Gemini. And so those planets are going to communicate,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like I feel like we're in transition. We're in a portal. I don't know how you feel about that, but I feel like 2025 is a portal. It's like where everything is changed. We feel it, but not really. And like 2026 is like up. We're gonna full steam. I don't know. What do you think about that? It's just like for me, it's like 2025 is like 1 foot out the door, 1 foot still in the home. Like I don't know where we're
Well,
gonna position ourselves.
I don't know about you all, but I was really, really noticing people's behaviors when these shifts started happening. And when Neptune entered Aries, everyone I was talking to was having something happen. And I kept texting everyone. I was like, it's just Neptune changed signs, and they're like, I don't know what that means.
Yes,
But
yes.
and that's the thing about the outer planets, right? Like they are impacting us on a longer term collective level, but we
Hmm.
feel the minuscule nuanced shifts on a personal level.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And
yeah.
I feel like with Neptune entering Aries and kind of like um, for some reason, I'm thinking about a generation, maybe because I'm part of that generation of Neptune in Capricorn. I think all of us belong to that generation, like here, and a lot of our listeners belong to that generation.
Mhm.
Uh, this Neptune square Neptune that's been activated as Neptune entered Aries, that's sort of like before that, the sextile through Pisces, while Neptune was in Pisces, like it allowed for non-action. Sextiles give an opportunity, they give some sort of clarity, but they don't invite into action. Squares force you out of the comfort zone. And this disillusionment that we've already kind of arrived at, this sort of like the veil is off with
The
Hmm.
Neptune
veil
entering.
has dropped.
It's dropped, but yeah, but the square that is it, we're all going to experience it at different times, Neptune square Neptune, but it's sort of like you have to act on what have you discovered as the veil
Mhm.
has dropped. The square is a creative shift in
Yeah.
behavior and direction. So I think that is something that's going to be very important. How do you act?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um,
And then you remind me of something like when you talked about the square because it's so important. Like you're right, all like we are a big generation people listening to us right now. We have this
mm,
Neptune in Capricorn, and of course, he's going to square us at any moment, depending on where you're born. But one because me is very early degree, I can start the feeling, and like you say, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. Square is a
mhm,
challenge. And one of the questions that came up for me, and it just made me think about it, is like, what is actually your dream? And it was very specific with the word dream.
mhm,
What is your dream? Like, stop
Hmm.
messing around. What do you really dream about? Like, not what other
mhm,
people want. What, and it was very because it happened for me as an ascendant Aries, so it's very about myself and my body and me. And I think for everyone is gonna appear this question gonna appear in different way depending on which houses is gonna the square is gonna happen. But it was very about the dream and being specific. Even if Neptune is about it's about being uncertain and it's like the big ocean and whatever like very invisible. The boundaries are not there. With this square, that was a very that was still the topic of of Neptune, which is the dream, but it was more framed in a way.
It's I totally hear that because in Neptune in Pisces is like, having a lot of fun there, not having you can just be lost in
mhm,
dream
mhm,
endlessly.
Hmm.
And Neptune moving into Aries is like, or what you said, what is your real dream? What is the dream really? I
Yeah,
think that word really is not
yeah,
coincidental that that's the word that came up for you because that it's action. It's
it's
mhm,
like, how
action.
are you going to act on the dream, man?
Yes,
mhm,
Like, how are we going to do this?
mhm.
yes.
Yeah.
And I feel like Saturn coming into Aries, because it's the first sign of the zodiac, it's the first light, is the pioneering year, is the one that pushed to action, is gonna make us like push to action. Like they definitely the word action is what I think we're gonna feel is like what can I put in place now? Even if it's not maybe like everything that I wanna do, but what are the small step? And they're gonna be like 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 right now is like a big thing about micro habits, like from the Atomic Habit, the books that
Mhm,
like implement little by little some habit, and with time is gonna grow. That's Saturn in Aries for me. That's
Well,
definitely that kind of vibe.
I agree. And I think the challenge collectively is to be able to integrate these two energies because Saturn is also about like long lasting change, long lasting. It's about the long-term plan. It's about making structures that will be sustainable. And Aries is literally the ram. I'm thinking about the word in Greek, but you know, like the ram that breaks down the wall, the door of the
Yeah.
fortress. It's not about lasting action. It's just about action. So how do
Yeah.
you integrate
Yeah,
these two?
it's difficult because do you keep just butting the same thing?
Yeah.
Like, and it's gonna be a
Yeah.
long process until it like 3 years later it goes down. And also like speaking about ram, it's a sacrificial lamb. So how do you not become a sacrificial lamb in the process? Because Aries is an archetype of either conscious warrior or sacrificial lamb that is
Interesting.
led into the battle on the behalf of the powerful. So
Right.
you gotta be, and I think here is Neptune is very tricky. It's identifying where it's your personal will and your personal courage and your personal desire versus, and Saturn when it goes into Aries, because it's a dispositor of Pluto in Aquarius through traditional rulership. So it is about this collective pool. Pluto is gonna pull that Saturn to the collective
Mm-hmm.
action. So being mindful, and I keep saying this to whoever I talk to. I'm like, this is your fire, and you have to be conscious of how you use it. Do not let
Mm-hmm.
anyone to use or channel your fire. It's yours and yours only, and you're the only one who can truly direct it. And it's very very difficult. But also one more thing, um, Aries is a sign where sun is exalted, but Saturn is in a full sign there,
Yeah.
right? So here this weird thing where it's like acting out of ego, but then that is not gonna be leading you to good results necessarily. So just
Mm-hmm.
how do we navigate this? It's going to be very tricky. It's a whole lot of self-awareness like, and patience. We have to train ourselves not to act on the first impulse.
Yeah. Which is, it ties into what we talk about with Neptune also leaving Pisces, and the veil dropping, right?
Mm.
And being like, okay, you have to have action. You can't just be wishy-washy. You can't just be living the dream. And you have to practice real discernment. And that's
Yeah.
what Saturn brings, hopefully. But I'm with you. I can't tell you right now. Maybe, we'll talk again on this podcast in 3 years and just be like, what happened to us all?
But not what it's not going to be what we expect. I
No.
went on a dive deep. It's funny how Neptune, if you notice, pulls our attention as we talk. That's what Neptune does.
Yeah.
We do not want to talk about Saturn. We want to talk about Neptune. Neptune
Yeah.
kind of takes over the space.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's funny how it happens. I can feel it. And yeah, it's very what we think activism will lead to. It's going to be different. What we think our
It's
personal
gonna be a.
agency, yeah,
It's
But
gonna.
it's all going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
but I think we can agree on there is going to be activism.
Yeah. Oh,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No question. And to understand a little bit about what we're talking about, like I think a good thing to start with is to talk about how was Saturn in Pisces. As we talk right now, Saturn is still in Pisces as at its
mm-hmm.
last degree. And talking about Saturn in Pisces, it came into the sign of Pisces in 2023 and is about to leave in 2025. Briefly, it really talked about focus on emotional maturity, spiritual responsibility, and it also dissolved illusion. So because again, Neptune was in the mix in Pisces for so long, when Saturn came, it kind of put structure. Basically, Neptune in Pisces is water, it's water flowing, and when Saturn comes, it's like the cup that holds
Mhm.
the water. It just gave a container to all that exploration or spiritual exploration that we did. And Neptune brought so much in Pisces in terms of spirituality. We never had like that much talk about astrology, that much podcast, which is great. I'm very happy about it. That much Tao, people practicing Tao. We had a huge expand of like different facets of spirituality. We were talking off recording about manifestation, about like the law of attraction. All of those subjects became very mainstream. Before Neptune in Pisces, you would never see a Vogue or a magazine Elle talking about really Mars entering Aries or what is the North Node. It was very like horoscope, love, work, your
Yeah.
personal life, very brief. Now everybody knows what is Mercury retrogrades mean. Like it's like it's literally mainstream spiritual woo-woo thing that we love so much. However, he also went into the shadow side, which is the downfall of this, which is like people getting into cult, people related too much into it, people being obsessed with the tarot deck, whatever it is. There is kind of an addiction around spiritual tool to have an answer, to have a clear answer about their path or anything like that. And so, and we can talk even about more different aspect of the shadow side of having Neptune in Pisces. But when Saturn came into Pisces, what I noticed is the science aspect coming into talking about manifestation, talking about the law of attraction. Science, it's been a while now that has been putting research around all of that, but it feels like it became very mainstream again when Saturn came into Pisces about how scientists. I was listening to like podcasts that do millions of views. We can talk about Mel Robbins, Jeff Shaddy, like a different podcast that talk about the metaphysic linked to the science, and that scientists did research about the power of manifestation, what is actually happening into the brain neurologically. So it feels like Saturn came putting structure around what works scientifically and what doesn't work scientifically. And if I just felt that shift the past 2 years, what do you think of all of that? I know I went on and on, but this is what, for me, Saturn in Pisces brought too. It brought more clarity, maybe more structure around this.
I think
Um,
it brought like the handbook, right? It made this intangible
mm-hmm,
Neptune-ness and Pisces more tangible. Using sometimes Neptunian methodology, such as social media and
mm-hmm.
phones and the illusion of image, like, moving
Image.
image,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
which I associate Neptune very much with that. But I think also you touched upon something, and it's Saturn is like discern or die. I don't know. It's like it's like
Mm-hmm.
learn to practice discernment or else. And I think that is the shadow aspect of this work archetypally, but I think it's like, hey, I'm here to put a container on the situation and to make the handbooks. So I'll give equal footing to all the ideas going around, but you are the one that needs to mature and to practice discernment enough in order to decide what it is that is real, even
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Neptune.
Mm-hmm.
mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
And let's like not forget that Pisces is ruled by Jupiter traditionally, so it is
Right.
a sign of exploration and science. Partially, I would assign that meaning to Jupiter and expansion of knowledge, higher
Mhm.
knowledge, all that. So yeah, no wonder that like this scientific, and also like on a personal note, when Saturn entered Pisces, and Neptune has been there since 2011, but that's when I personally quit drinking. I was not an alcoholic, but I was like 3 steps away. So it's just a very interesting and how the conversation about like um, alcohol has changed,
Oh yeah.
in the last 3 years dramatically, and also like
Well,
talking
it,
about opioid addiction that is ramping, like going rampage through the country. i
mhm.
i just learned, like I didn't know about that, and I've learned about that in the last few years.
Mm-hmm,
So that, how do we turn away from the divine in the favor of instant gratification. That's a big one.
You're bringing up a really, really good point too about, not just you on a personal level, but also looking at the younger generations today, how they don't engage with substances. They don't engage with, I mean, just TMI here, like I was a raver and in the like late 90s in Europe. So like
Yeah.
my drug use
Yeah.
was there.
Yeah.
But and it's a big part of my spiritual like journey. But I think it's very, very interesting to see that younger generations are not, they're just not, they're either completely sober or they don't use any drug, like nothing. Granted, I will say that maybe an unhealthy relationship with social media and devices is
Yes.
the current day fake opium, but yes, absolutely. And I think there's a difference between what you're describing, Mariana, which is the like there's like a collective issue that has to do with the opioid crisis and the fact that a lot of these substances were originally prescription controlled versus the dark web off market personal use of narcotics.
Exactly.
And where the power dynamic there lies. But now we're going into Pluto territory, so I'll bring it back.
But Saturn has been disposed of Pluto again for the last many, many years, since 2008 in Capricorn now. So any Saturn transit will speak about Pluto going forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But because like it's hard to talk about only Saturn, like we said, you mentioned Neptune took the scene a little bit, and is also we cannot deny that Pluto is hanging out. I mentioned it at the beginning of the podcast. We have Jupiter entering Cancer, so Jupiter in Cancer was definitely square Neptune and Saturn in Aries. We have Uranus in Gemini. Uranus in Gemini, great for talking to Neptune and Saturn, but we have Pluto in Aquarius too. So like even if we are talking about theme related to Saturn in Pisces, Saturn in Aquarius, I don't think we can push away, like you mentioned, Mariana and Antigone, Pluto in Aquarius, that we'll talk about theme of addiction and like we just mentioned a few drugs. Are we going to stay out of it? Are we going to purge it? Or are we going to go into the addiction part? But when I also think about Pluto in Aquarius, like, and with Saturn in Aries, I just feel like it's going to pressure us. There's going to be a pressure of the collective to follow Saturn in Aries. I feel like everybody's going to feel the air and the fire. Like those elements, we can like Uranus and Gemini, it's air. Pluto in Aquarius, it's air. The fire and the air is going to take place in the next couple of years, and it's going to take a major place in the collective. So I think ideas and activism is going to be linked, and how we communicate, how we exchange ideas, that can be through social media. And I think social media is changing. We said it earlier. We might use other social media. People's going to take really strong political decision. We're already seeing it with social media. People being pushed, like getting out of X, stopping Instagram, going on Substack, going on YouTube more. Like you can feel those waves. It's and we're gonna use those platform politically. But just to go back to the Saturn in Pisces, it was a time that helped me. That helped me structure my spiritual belief. That helped me structure, instead of like, oh, there is this, and I want to worship this goddess, and I want to do this witchcraft. Like, like having this whole world to open it. I thought, I was like, but what do I want to do? Where do I want to commit? Where do I want to create a consistent habit? And I'm Muslim, so I went back to religion, not entirely, but that was when I went back to religion. That was very, I was calling to it, and I'm still studying. I'm still in the process of like looking. I'm not finished. It's your journey in life, but I feel like Saturn definitely put some strong boundary about the danger of spirituality, but also about the opportunity and what can you bring in your body and your connection between mind, body, spirit, you know?
I
And
think you're touching upon something, the danger of not having a container.
yeah.
And the whole, Saturn and Pisces was like, y'all need to have a container. You need to have a methodology. You need to have a school. You need to have devotion. You need to have discipline. You can't just, you know, to paraphrase Mariana from earlier off the record, moon circle manifest.
Yeah.
There is like Saturn asks us to work for it, definitely.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's insane. But yeah, Saturn and Pisces, when it started, I remember when I was writing about it, the only word for me was, and I'm also by the way Muslim,
Mhm.
and was devotion. I'm like,
Mm,
how, but like, what does devotion look like? And I really had no answer. I've been among spiritual people and different paths of manifestation of that spirituality, but a lot of what I've observed through Saturn and Pisces and Neptune and Pisces is fragmentation. In order to hold us through this like really difficult period that we are in, and it's going to continue, it has to be something very like, again, devotional. And it's not going to be offered to you. It's not going
yeah.
to be, you have to take responsibility of sort of like going into that container.
Well, and that's the whole practice and concept of initiation, and who the teachers are, and who is the one to guide you through this process, even though this
Mm.
process is individually and completely your own. And I this all resonates very strongly with me as well, because I also had the question of devotion and trying to find trying to give shape to a spiritual practice, which is what eventually led to me doing the work that I do, is because there is so much out there. And we are in this era where you can just search on TikTok for whatever it is that you want and then get some information from some random person, not knowing what their devotional practice looks like. And then just, hodgepodging it all together. Even more so than the early beginnings of the internet when I was starting out like on this journey. So yeah, devotion is definitely the name of the game for
Yeah.
for Saturn and Pisces. And now I'm curious, I just keep coming back to the word precise action for Saturn and Aries.
Yeah. And when we talk about like transiting to talking about Saturn, passing Saturn in Aries is basically we transition from water to fire. So basically inner processing to outward movement. And Pisces, the end of the zodiac cycle, Aries begins it. So a collective reset. There's a mood shift. Like we can talk about dreaming of change is no longer enough. Like Saturn in Aries is like, want us to act. We mentioned action. And Saturn asks, we said it, long-term integrity. Aries wants immediate action. The tension is going to be real because also, like we said, stalking to different planet around the zodiac. So the tension is going to be real, and it's going to say, what are you going to do about it, Saturn? What are you going to do about it,
Yeah,
Saturn?
yeah.
So
Do you have a plan?
do you have a plan? You
Do you
have a
have
plan, and
that's a big one. And
plan.
like, it's all connected because, like, I'm briefly, that's why we were given Saturn and Pisces. Because if you do not have anything otherworldly, so to say, to rely on in this world of the matter, anything can pull you. That's the main reason. And devotion, again, it's like you can have a guide and person who can like help you form that, still take responsibility after, like, you have to show up daily.
Yeah.
It's work, it's hard. Saturn in Pisces, in Aries, it's about hard work. You can't bypass that.
And like you said, show up daily. Like what the Saturn theme, it's like really discipline, structure. There's also a karmic lesson with Saturn.
Yeah.
this boundary maturation. There is something that is asking to be disciplined. And in Aries, is like the Aries archetype is like the initiator, is independence, is leadership, is assertion, is new beginnings. It's
Mhm.
like together, basically, when you take Saturn theme and Aries archetype, is like learning to lead with responsibility, facing ego-driven behavior. There's gonna be a lot of about ego, about the
Mm-hmm.
self, you know, with
Yeah.
that transit.
Yeah.
We can see it with
Yeah.
leaders, we can see it with ourselves. It's gonna be a bright side and a shadow side to it, and we'll have to discern that. There's Saturn that is like teaching us how to do, I will say, sustainable anger, courage, you know, sustainably, like not anger like blowing up and then doing nothing, but like anger that lasts, that give
Yeah.
you like the
Mm-hmm.
fuel to keep going.
Slow burn.
Slow
Slow burn.
burn,
Oh, it's
exactly.
funny. Mars is exalted in Saturn ruled sign, the ruler of Aries.
Mm-hmm.
Mars is exalted in Capricorn. So
Yeah,
here's an interesting dichotomy. It's like
yeah.
that's what we need to learn. We need to learn Mars in Capricorn action style.
Yes, yes, it's very interesting because I just keep thinking about it's kind of like, okay, you learned you created your own relationship with spirit, which by the way, I think it's really funny. Like I think spirituality is actually very Saturnian.
Me too.
And what I know of
Yeah.
the unseen realm, it has very, very rigid and strict rules and ways of
Mm-hmm.
engagement. And you know,
Interesting.
there's many playbooks, you know, there's libraries, like there it's very Saturnian. And the entities sometimes are very Saturnian as well. And I think, you know, an aspect of that learning came through Saturn and Pisces. And like now it's like, okay, it's like, you know, you have a framework for what the unseen looks like. Now, can you apply that to the action that you want to take? Do you have a plan? Again, um, I had something else to say, but I lost it now. It'll come back.
It'll come back.
We'll come back.
Another thing that I want to bring up with Saturn and Aries that because the component of fear of the self is also going to be very prominent. The fear of the true self, the
Absolutely.
fear of the application of the true self, and I suspect that the first half of that transit is going to be battling that fear, and the second part of the transit is going to be ability to slowly implement whatever
Embody it.
the yeah and like bring it into the light
Mm-hmm.
because this is and for me the word submission came because Saturn likes submission of sorts, and submission of the to the true self is not an easy process. I feel like it's like and we think we do know what the true self is, and I think the next 3 years will really show us what is that.
Yeah, and I think this is an uncomfortable place for because Aries archetypally is not really
About
about
submission.
about
the
submission, about
the
going in. It's more like,
yeah
you know, it's the definition of like fuck around and find out, right?
yeah
That's sorry, can I cuss?
yeah
Yeah, you
okay.
can.
Okay.
You can.
Um, I think it is very much, you know, Aries is like, whatever, we have an expression in Greek, I'll go even if it turns out badly. And I feel like Aries is very that. It's like, act first, ask for forgiveness later. And Saturn is not like that. Saturn is
Mm-mm.
like, no, you gotta think about it before.
Mm-hmm. And also, like I already brought this up, but like another side of the Aries archetype is that the submission is the submission of the fighter to a king.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Who is your king?
Yeah.
Is your king of this realm or is it of the
Mm-hmm.
other realm? If it's of this realm, you're in trouble.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah.
You can't see
If
me, but I was aggressively agreeing with what Mariana was saying.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's truly like you have to, like, the highest manifestation of Aries to me personally is, and again, it's my personal, it's a submission to something that another person cannot take from you. A
Mm-hmm.
president, whoever.
Yeah, it's a belief. It's
It's a
also
yeah.
it can be a
And
belief, or
again,
it can be
it was
spiritually
built with
God.
Saturn in Pisces,
Yeah.
and it's through humbling.
But I just keep getting this it's like the lead warrior, right, for the king, the lead strategist, the archetypally, the god of war in a way. I know it's Mars. I don't know. In my mind, Aries and Mars get very conflated in some way sometimes, but it is that as well. And it really, really resonated with me what you said, where it's like, who wields you?
Mm-hmm.
Who wields you, and do you wield your destructive power
Mm-hmm. On whose behalf?
on whose behalf? Yeah.
Hmm. I think it's gonna be. I think we're gonna see that a lot in different
We already
war.
seen this. I
We
think that there
already,
is
yeah,
already
we
detect
already. I just feel
that
like there's gonna be a
guy.
peak of this, and I do think people gonna fall into it, or people's gonna have their own agency and really find their own path into it. But it's the danger of an ex. Years. It was the danger in the past. It always been, but I feel like those next coming years going to be also like again a peak of that danger of
Yeah.
who you giving your power to, who do you believe, who is your teacher, because Saturn represents teaching and teachers and leaders also.
Mm-hmm.
Again, Pluto in
Yeah,
Aquarius, like,
exactly.
where is your power? Where is your agency
Yeah,
power to the people? Who are we following? How are we
we
disrupting?
following.
How are we liberating?
I
Mm-hmm.
do feel we deeply crave, and I hope with Saturn in Aries we're gonna have that. We deeply crave leaders that we believe in, that we dream of, that we have leaders that can unite instead of divide people. And I hope Pluto, I know we're at the beginning and so much happened already. And we know the first degrees of kind of chaotic always, but
Two
with time,
degrees. We got
two
it.
degrees, and it's already like washing us away. But I hope leaders with Saturn Aries will come out, and leaders that, yeah, unite and in the
Um,
fight.
Not to sound like a Debbie Downer, but I will.
Okay, do
Probably,
it.
Karima, me. Um, y yeah, Neptune and Aries, I'm a very apprehensive about leadership going forward. I'm not gonna I'm gonna resist to put anyone on pedestal with with the might of my everything I have. Any
Mm-hmm.
human, I will resist to put them on pedestal, including myself.
Yeah.
Like, it's very important, I think, that we are, while Neptune, it's not a Saturn, like you said. Saturn, if there was just Saturn in Aries, by the end there would be maybe crystallization of a figure. But with Neptune,
Yeah.
it will show up, but in 14 years,
I
I'm
think,
afraid.
Neptune bring fanatic to
yeah,
that
I
this
mean,
fanatic aspect
I
of
Mhm.
Neptune.
I just really, what I keep getting is the image of the Wizard of Oz.
Mm,
And
That could be a
that's a good
perfect
one.
image. It's such a perfect image.
Yes.
thank them, thanks guys. But
Yeah.
The
but
projection.
it's there is a great and powerful
Oh,
leader,
yes.
and we all, that's the solution. It's like Delulu is the Solulu, but in
Yes.
such a different way, like when it comes to leadership. And then I think the Saturn is like Dorothy being like, or Toto being
Yeah, totally.
being, and pulling the curtain and just seeing that there's a man, a short man, like banning
Yeah.
this
Manipulating.
projection. Yes. I'm with you, Mariana. Like, what if it was just Saturn, I would be like, yes, we are
Yeah.
on a good path as humanity. With
At the
Neptune
end.
there,
Yeah.
with Neptune there, I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't know what's gonna happen.
No, I'm honestly like,
I'm still gonna hope for someone. One or two pop
we
up.
need a
That already
Sagittarius who
go.
believes.
I
We need a
was just gonna say,
Sagittarius who believes.
I was like,
Yeah.
that's exactly.
Yeah.
I was like, that's why we need you here, Karima.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
yeah,
um,
Exactly. It's
but
just,
that's I do like it feel like when you talk about Neptune, when you bring it back to Neptune, you both like it feels scary because we know Neptune what it can bring in terms of leaders. And
yeah.
so it is. There is like I feel there is a we're like really, I feel like we're on a earthquake and like we don't know where we're stepping into, you know? But
Also
like you
with
said it, Wizard of Oz, it was just a perfect image.
Yeah, but also like I have to just call in because this Neptune transit is long and this Uranus and Gemini, like I I'm thinking about it on a personal level because it's like the beginning of our midlife crisis here collectively, but like also I'm thinking about it on a collective level where I'm like, okay, is this Neptune Uranus relationship in Aries and in Gemini going to be, I mean, it's so, I don't know which direction it can go. Like it can be
Mm-hmm.
so, it's so unpredictable with Uranus there. It's like the information that, because I'm just thinking Wizard of Oz and mass communications.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't, this is not a very good place to
It's
be in
very
collectively.
cardinal and very mutable. So it
Yeah.
starts, but then it's 180. It starts and
Does
then
it
it's 180.
finish? Does it like just keep changing? Like, you know?
Well, but the good news is that over the next, 6 to 9 years, like Saturn is going to be moving through these signs, just slowly
Yeah.
being like, all
Yeah.
right, let's put some structure here. Let's put some structure,
Yes.
let's
Once
just
it
at
gets to
least.
Gemini, yeah,
So it'll be in the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think that we're in for a little bit of chaos, and chaos can be
100%.
chaos neutral or right now I'm like, okay, I'm seeing chaos neutral, but it could go either way very
Mm.
Yeah.
easily.
And I
But thank you
love,
for for reminding us that, like, it's true because we stay focused on Saturn and Aries, but and we know that Neptune is staying way longer in Aries. But like, it's true,
mhm,
Saturn's going to shift and go to different sign and reshape those sign, and that will be a support to that activist
100%.
revolution that we are starting.
I do love for our listeners, if you notice how hopeful we are for Saturn overall, how it is not a point of undoing of all of us, but something that can keep us all together. If we
That's
see it
true. That's
through the
true.
right lens, right? It's like our silver lining is right relationship with Saturn. That's,
Well,
yeah.
I think Saturn demands a certain level of maturity before you're able to even engage. And I think that's why people fear and struggle so much with like their personal Saturn return, right? The first one, because they're like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. But I think it does demand a certain level of like actual biological maturity. Like you need time to pass in order for you to
Mhm.
have a understanding copacetic relationship with Saturn. So yes,
Yes,
Yeah.
I support that.
100%.
And to just, I'm gonna use what you just said, Antigone, to move to our next kind of topic we wanted to talk about is like we say Saturn, like the maturity of Saturn to engage with it and like to understand a little bit what Saturn in Aries is gonna offer us is good to get back in time a little bit and get back maybe to the last time that Saturn was in Aries. We're not gonna go through all the time that Saturn was in Aries, but like at least the last time.
Mm,
And it was from April 1996 to February 1999. And looking basically back at what was happening, that gave us a little bit of insight of what collectively we might experience. Again, the configuration is very different. We have Neptune, like we said, we have Pluto in Aquarius, Uranus in Gemini, Jupiter going into Cancer. So of course it's going to be different. Each of them, one of them, going to give a tone to Saturn. So, like we mentioned, Saturn, planet of boundaries, structure, long term growth. It takes 29 years, just as a reminder, 29 years around the zodiac. And at the time that between 1996 and 1999, we went through an individual empowerment. It was a time of individual empowerment. So, especially among young people, interesting, Aries, first sign, very very young. One of the biggest cultural trends was the rise of the internet at the time, not as a
definitely.
technology, but as a space for self expression. And that was the
Mhm.
start of creating personal website, joining online forum, even building like digital personas. That was a very Saturn in Aries time. And
Mhm.
the creation of identity within a new structure. So we were building the foundation of what it means to be seen and heard on a digital world. Really interesting. I wonder with Uranus and Gemini, that might bring a new aspect of that also.
Well, it's interesting. This just popped into my head, but I don't know if you're familiar with this concept, but there are people and organizations that are more grassroots and independent working towards a new internet,
Mm-hmm.
working towards an internet that is decentralized. It's called decentralized web, and it's about not having a profile of your identity tied to your consumption, which then is sold for profit to the moguls of the
That
internet
is
rulership.
so revolutionary to me. I love that shit. This is amazing.
So I remember, and I'm sure we all here and our listeners remember the beginning of the internet.
Yeah.
Um, in somewhat, we had some interaction with it, and even and you're totally right, like creating identities, but I think there was a bit of like smoke and mirrors there too. And just a new way of engaging with knowledge and information, not just identity, but knowledge and information, and the amount of access that you had at that point in time, suddenly out of nowhere, and the amount of discernment that you had to practice with that version of the internet.
Mm-hmm.
That is so
Because,
funny what she's saying, because just to give you just one piece of what I found about this time, when the last time Saturn was in Aries, and this building up of like our own personal space into the internet, it was a saying when it's like, if the system doesn't give me space, and I quote, if the system doesn't give you space, I will make my own. And it's just very linked to what you're saying of like making our own internet without being tracked by commercial and everything that is making us crazy right now and basically brainwash our brain.
yeah.
So it was very interesting about what you were saying and the link between.
Well, and which ties into some other things that were happening at that time.
Yeah. So it was there was also major, like politically there was major movement. We had the WTO, the protests really focusing on issue including workers' right, sustainable economic, environmental, but also social issue. It started in Seattle, 1999. And really thousands of people took it on the street. And there was organization created after that. There was a very fiery passion, a lot of civil disobedience. That was major at that time. And it was very bold. It was very grassroots, organizing face to face with the structure of power, very against the market economy. Like it was giving that vibe. And I think we will have another form of that, maybe even in a higher octave because of Pluto and Aquarius. And I think that will definitely feed that against market, against capitalism. That kind of vibe's I think, is gonna flourish again. Um, and then the pop culture, just to give you, we talked about it a little bit off record, but it was very interesting to show that we have a strong warrior archetype during that time, during the last time that Saturn was in Aries, and we had like character like Buffy, the vampire slayer,
Mm-hmm.
Xena, the warrior princess, the very rising of action heroes, but also in gaming like Lara Croft. Those characters was a bold, physical, very muscular, confrontational, and they were very into their own path, very into their own. It was very also spiritual in their journey. When I see the Buffy, the quest of saving the world,
Well,
Xena.
and Lara Croft is all about, she's an archaeologist, right? She's about
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
heritage preservation and discovery and unearthing the old wisdom. Xena
Yeah.
as well. Also, I would like to point out here that the wave of feminism at the time, not only how women were with each other, women and femmes, like more marginalized groups, but the relationships that were portrayed in pop culture and on media, like in Buffy, where you have Willow and Tara and their romance, how Xena and Gabrielle are like the lesbian icon, like this kind of
True.
iconography in pop culture was very revolutionary for the time.
It's true. It was very, very revolutionary. And yeah, you reminded me that was the first time for me. I was young. I was seeing this. I was never engaging with what it is to be queer, what it is to be queer. Like that was my first time through pop culture. It was
Mm-hmm.
never through school around in my environment. It was very taboo.
Yeah.
So yeah,
One more
definitely.
thing that is just coming up just now as I'm thinking about this. I think on the flip side, this was also the era of the imagery when it comes to particularly how women were portrayed and how heroine
Hmm.
chic was the vibe, and
Oh yeah,
how I am seeing a little bit of that return right now.
sexy like heroin
But
fighters, like
but it's the starving yourself to be sexy conversation, and I think that Saturn does that. Saturn has this like gets off on restrictions sometimes, and I think that um that's just an additional, thing to put in the cauldron here about
you're
how
so
the
right.
severity and discipline, when it goes too far off the other side, this is what it looks like.
Hmm.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
It's all from which angle you approach all of those things.
Of
What's
course.
the end goal? What's the goal you set for yourself? And again, because as Neptune entered uh, Aries, and I know that Saturn is entering Aries, and I thought about a week ago, I'm like, what can I consciously take out of my routine? And I like doing that, and I like to restrict myself. I have this, let's call it a kink, where I'm
I was
like,
like, Capricorn placements.
yeah, I have them on the top of my chart with my midheaven. So yeah, and I'm like, I'm not gonna have any sugar until Saturn enters Aries, so I'm prepared. Not because I want to lose weight or any
No,
of
of course, of
that,
course.
but for me, and from my perspective, and I might be wrong, but I'm like, it's like I need to be devotion,
Yes.
and it's like things like that I think are helpful.
They are super helpful, and
Yeah.
when you go into excess, and I don't know what was happening otherwise astrologically there, but I think it's very interesting that also, like, we have simultaneously, like, talking about it from the feminist lens, simultaneously this like spiritual warrior archetype, female archetype coming up, and at the same time an environment and a um visual representation of like keeping what, I heard somewhere that like a starving woman is being a disempowered woman, and like I
Mhm.
think that's definitely true, how the zeitgeist can simultaneously be like, you know be strong and sensitive, but also
Mhm.
like, make yourself disappear.
Yeah,
And
no.
at this time of feminism as well, there was very much the vibe in the workspace of like, anything you can do, I can do, bleeding, right? That was the vibe. And we've moved far from that, where we're like, we do not do things now in through the patriarchal capitalist lens. We do things through a more femme rooted way of being in
Mhm.
feminist movement now.
And
Mhm.
to join the conversation, like when we're talking about extreme and all that, that was the time when Saturn was in Aries, the last time that was early conversation about burnout.
Hmm.
What I found, it was like we didn't have the language, we didn't use burnout as a word to describe it, but people were pushed so hard during that time, like through activism, creativity, spending time on this new technology that is the internet, like for your personal gain or for being visible, that many started to hit a wall.
Hmm.
And basically Saturn like was in Aries, like teaching us how the fire burn bright, but it can, if you don't manage it, it can wisely burn you out. That
Mhm.
was
Yeah,
literally the expression that came after burnout. But in that
Mhm.
time
absolutely.
we didn't really know
Makes
what it
sense.
was. And again, like the question that I feel with Saturn and Aries is like, are you acting with intention? And like,
Mhm.
is your fire grounded in purpose? And is it sustainable? Always like depriving yourself is not sustainable. Like always ask, is am I doing this in the long term? Do I want to see immediate results? Saturn in Aries will not help you with that. It
No,
will ask you in the long term. So starving yourself is not an option, you
Mm.
know.
exactly.
In any circumstances, yeah.
Or working your ass off. Yes, maybe when you
Mhm.
have a project that makes sense, but like in a year-long period, that you're not
because
gonna
because Saturn tells you, put it in a container,
exactly
contain it.
With
contain it.
time, with framework, with whatever. whatever it is the container means for you.
Exactly. So if you're like, okay, I'm going to work really hard, I'm going to work really hard for 6 hours a day, these 6 hours a day. And then to tie it back, it is devotion. Saturn is devotion. I'm like all for Big Daddy Saturn. I'm
Me
like,
too.
listen, we got it.
Yeah.
That's the key to success. Also, whatever success means for you. I never seen anyone, because in our society where we see like people succeeding but we don't see their full story, their full background. Sometimes they've spent 10 years, 15 years, 20 years to work with failing and rising up and failing again. And so in that with the internet, sometimes we just see a reel that explains someone that became a millionaire or that succeeds in his business, but we don't see any of the labor.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so like this is a strong reminder that nobody get where they are without a
No,
very
without
strong
Saturn.
consistency,
Not without
structure,
Saturn.
not
Yeah.
without
Or
Saturn.
if you
Nope.
get there, you'll fall from the
Oh,
spot real fast,
absolutely.
too.
Yeah. Maybe the lottery. Yes, I get it. And even then, there's a lot of people falling down from that tree too, because
Because
they're
you gotta
spending so much.
contain it. You
Because you
gotta
gotta
contain
contain it.
it.
That's gonna be
Yeah.
the word: container, container, container.
100%. And one thing I think it's very important that we talk about when you guys brought up the identity and the past Saturn transit with Neptune in Aries, be very, very mindful with identity theft in all its forms, and it's not, it's like verifications starting from the basics of any accounts and any information that you have, from a
Absolutely.
very like protect your IP, protect whatever it is. Choose who you work with very carefully. You have to be very selective with this transit.
Absolutely.
Which I think that Pluto dispositor, like being Saturn dispositor in Pluto, Aquarius can be very selective in the associations, and I think it's something that Saturn can bring.
It'll help, yeah, definitely. Also because, you know, it's the world that we live in demands so much information from you.
Yes.
So much personal information. I mean,
So much.
you want to sign up for a mailing like list provider, you have to give your address.
100%. And also, like, yeah, have we seen with what government is doing with as Neptune entered, that people disappear? We talk literally, not just like, okay, we start with illegals, then we go to green card. People, that whole Neptune identity, it's not, it's happening, and it's gonna,
Scary.
yeah. So just on any level that you feel you have control, just think about how can you protect your identity.
Yeah, use the veil. Use the veil. Like the
Use
veil
the
has
veil.
been dropped.
Exactly.
There's a lot of things
I
that need
love
to come out,
that.
but use the veil.
Yeah. And just to before finishing that wonderful episode, we wanted to give you to all our listener something that can be useful. Unfortunately, we cannot go sign by sign, but Antigone offered like to do maybe like some Saturn in different cardinal sign. Those one that gonna be also majorly touched. Like for example, Saturn in Aries that oppose your Libras, or about like your Cancer or your Capricorn, whatever is your placement. We're gonna go. So you wanted to do cardinal sign, right?
I just wanted to just touch upon a little bit about, like, first of all, if you have Saturn in Libra, or if you have, if you have Saturn in Libra, then you're going through a Saturn opposition by definition. So what that means for you. Also, if you were born between 1996 and 1999, welcome to your first Saturn return. And I think we were just talking, this is always the case because astrology is not compartmentalized. And as much as AI tries to synthesize, it doesn't do a very good job with astrology specifically. So I think knowing your chart is the biggest thing, and knowing if you have any placements, of course, in Aries and in Libra on that axis, but of course, what am I saying? Cancer, Capricorn. Yes. I struggle with the crosses, but yes, any placements in Cancer and Capricorn. And, even if it's not directly opposed, or in the same house as where Saturn and Neptune are now hanging out, if they are on the Capricorn Cancer axis, as I'm sure Mariana can speak to more as the person who has Capricorn placements, it will it's squaring those. So it's either opposing your placements in Libra or it's squaring your Cancer and Capricorn
Yeah.
placements.
So
Yeah.
yeah, and if you have Saturn in Capricorn, like for example, I do, and my midheaven is also there, or Saturn in Cancer, which is going to be totally different generation. You're going through your Saturn squares. Within your Saturn square cycle it is, it depends on the ascendant. Is it a closing square, opening square? It's all going to
Right.
be relative. But the themes of identity, relationships, cooperation, home, and your status in the society or how you're seen in the larger world are gonna be showing up for everyone, a challenge for everyone because the cardinal cross.
Maturity, right? Maturity.
Yeah.
How do
And
you show up
yeah,
Yeah,
and
in
to
all
give
with
those
you a
authority?
yeah.
Yeah.
To give you an example, like I had my Saturn return. So Saturn return is giving asking you to basically it's the here in our world, 18 you become adults. In astrology is between 27 and 30, like at your
30.
Saturn 30 at
30,
your
yeah,
And
Saturn
I'm like
return.
30.
So
yeah,
very late.
exactly.
But when my Saturn square, because I have Saturn in Sagittarius, so my Saturn
Same.
square, my responsibility with my kid, definitely having a new layer of responsibilities. So that it was challenging to manage as first year, very hard, and now the best because it took consistency, work, scheduling, all of that, what Saturn theme has. So like sometimes it can just be scary when it's a challenge opposition. It can be scary because the first hit is always, oh my God, like this new things happening and I have to change my life internally or externally to manage that new thing. But in the long run, it helps you grow. It brings you more joy. It's
Yeah.
to, at the end of the day, to satisfying you personally. It's pushing you to your comfort zone to satisfy you. Saturn is like the tough love. For me, I interpret Saturn stuff. It can be
I can see
challenging.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's challenging, but it's the most rewarding.
But also
One of the most rewarding at the end.
you get assigned a new role.
A
And
new role.
the question is, are you going to rise up to meet this role, or are you just going to go cry in the corner? Because you can. And this is when, Saturn is like, ugh, you're crying in the corner. We got to figure this out. But
Oh, you're crying in the
It is, and
corner.
the thing is like when you go against Saturn, what happened is depression. What
Absolutely.
happened is depression. You get
Woo.
very down on yourself. Self-esteem is coming like right up because you don't do the work to get where you're supposed to be, and you can.
Oh,
Saturn will never
Karima.
give you the I know. We know those team. We all can relate to this, It's like
Yeah.
it's hard to talk about it, but it's like the reality is like it's going to push you
So
and you're going to
true.
be depressed until you really become you, the self that you're supposed to be. And it asks work sometimes and
Yeah.
dedication. And is ultimately to make you better. I don't like to use better version, but it's to
More
put you
you.
in the space where there is more you, that is more aligned to the journey that you're supposed to grow to. And more you're going to fight Saturn, and Saturn always win,
Saturn
Saturn.
always
Win.
wins.
Yes.
And you know what? That's one thing that Saturn and Aries will appreciate. The
Yeah.
winning.
The winning at the end.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Yes, yes, yes.
But
No, I'm looking
thank
forward to
you.
that. This conversation, I think, is very helpful
Yeah.
to
I think it was
grounding.
very good. I really enjoyed that conversation. That was very helpful for me. And
Yeah.
I'm
I
pretty
mean,
sure it's going to be helpful for
same.
our listeners.
I think we can get lost in, the things that we know, specifically the three of us, and we're like, oh, could it go like this? Could it go like that? And I think just communicating and grounding it in a way and putting it in a container that helps.
Container. I
Yeah.
think I'm going to put it in the title of this episode, container.
Container.
Definitely. But thank you both. It was a
Thank you
very
both too.
lovely conversation. I learned so much from you two. I'm so happy that I have you two in my life as astrologer.
I'm
It's
so happy
a
too.
blessing.
This
Yeah.
feels
Likewise,
great.
yeah. Thank you,
So
guys.
if you want to know more about your Saturn in Aries or your Neptune in Aries or Pluto or Jupiter or Uranus, Feel free to go on Antigone page, Mariana's page, my page. You can learn so much more. You can have personal reading. I know, Mariana, you have a Substract, and Antigone, you have
I'm
your own
mostly
podcast.
Substack, yeah.
Substack. Sorry, Substract. Substack.
No, no, no.
Sorry.
I'm on my
They got
most,
it, Karima. They got it.
yeah. It's the website, but I'm also on TikTok where I talk about
Nice.
stuff. So
Oh, good for
Get to the
you.
new generation.
yeah.
Get to the new generation.
Yeah, it's just infuriating to see that I had to go through the chaos of the internet of the early days to learn things, and now we're back there.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, cyclical.
And I know that Antigone, you have your new podcast. Is it a weekly podcast or is it like a more monthly?
It's more every 2 weeks is the goal. It's been
Every two.
monthly lately, but it is every 2 weeks. Yeah, everything is Dear Antigone. So
Okay.
my website, my podcast, my
Okay.
handles. Yeah.
Okay.
Also, I completely emulated Instagram. I deleted my Instagram from 2011 and I have just started a new account.
Oh,
So
oh wow.
You're like
there
starting
you go.
fresh. Okay,
That's
but I
cool.
will put anyway all your information to you about you
Great.
both in the description.
Great.
And I hope to see you again for a new conversation about maybe a new transit or maybe about Saturn going into Taurus.
Yeah,
Who
Yep.
knows? But I
we'll love
send
that.
yes. I wish
Yeah.
you a happy day. I love you
You too.
both. Bye everyone.
Bisous.
Bye-bye.
Bisous.
Thank you for tuning in to the Modern Witches podcast. We hope you've been inspired to cultivate your own magic and to craft your own spiritual practices. Let us know what sparked your curiosity by leaving us a comment on this episode or leave us a review. And don't forget to subscribe to the show so that you never miss an episode. Your feedback and engagement truly fills our cups. If you're looking for more ways to gather with your fellow witches, please support our work on Patreon. Learn more at modernwitches.org. Blessed be.